In this video, we will explore the basics of the programming process and how to program. It may seem counterintuitive, but the first few steps of writing code have nothing to do with a computer. They are done using a pen and paper. The first step is to understand the problem you are trying to solve thoroughly and clearly define in simple terms what the program is to do. The second step is to visualize how would your program in its most bare-bone form would run on your computer. Next, use a design tool to create a model of the program that clearly describes how the program will flow. Go over that model and make sure that it's free of logical errors. That is, it will work and give correct results if you plug in some inputs. Now that you have your program designed, here comes the fun part. You can now start writing the code on your computer. After choosing the programming language, start typing and compiling your code. No matter how experienced you are, you will most likely make mistakes as you type your code. These mistakes will result in compile time errors. Compile time errors are errors resulting from violating the rules of the syntax of the programming language. As you code, your integrated development environment or IDE will highlight these errors and help you fix them. Keep coding and fixing your code until you complete the implementation of your program. Once you have a program that compiles with no compile time errors, it's time to take your code for a test drive. Run the program and input data to test it. As you test your code, fix any errors that appear while running the code. These errors are referred to as runtime errors, and they will break your program and cause it to stop. Keep fixing runtime errors and check for new compile time errors that may appear as you add more code lines to fix the runtime errors. We are almost there. Now is the time to load test your code by validating the results of your program. In this phase, you want to try to find cases under which your code may fail to work correctly and will give wrong results. These errors will be due to some logical errors that you may have overlooked while designing your code. The programming process is all about developing an error-free code to solve a problem. Let's take an example to help us understand the process and the difference between these types of errors. You are asked to develop a program to calculate the hourly pay of a user based on their gross pay and the hours worked. The first step is to clearly define what the program is to do. Alright, from the requirement, it's clear that the purpose is to calculate the user's hourly pay. From the problem statement, we know that we are given two inputs, the number of hours worked and the gross pay. What we want to do is to develop a code to solve this problem. The code will give the step-by-step process to calculate and give an output that represents the hourly pay. This process is also called an algorithm. We will talk more about algorithms in another video. Now that you are clear on what your program needs to do, you can solve the problem using simple math by saying that the output hourly pay is equal to the gross pay divided by the number of hours worked. The second step is to visualize your program running on your computer. For example, we need two inputs, hours worked and the gross pay. This means that I need to prompt the user for these inputs. So in my program, I visualize that the first line to be displayed to the user will be the prompt for the user's worked hours. Let's say the user enters 10 hours. The second line would be the prompt for the gross pay. Let's say $150. Now that I have my inputs, I should print to the user the expected hourly pay output, which is a 15 in this case. The next step will be to model your program using any modeling tool. One of the most popular modeling tools is called a flowchart. From its name, a flowchart is a chart that shows the flow of your code. We will discuss flowcharts later in the course. Another popular modeling tool is pseudocode. From Wikipedia, a pseudocode is an informal high-level description of the operating principle of a computer program or an algorithm. What this means is that you describe the program steps in a high-level language, which is programming language independent, such that you and other programmers can understand. For example, in our case, a possible pseudocode to solve this problem is as follows. Display how many hours did you work? Input hours. Display how much do you get paid? Input gross pay. store the value of gross pay divided by hours in the rate variable, display the value in the rate variable. As you explain your code and read it out loud, you start to check if the logic of your code is sound. The next step is to type your code in a programming language that you chose. In this course, we will be using Java. As you type the code, clear all compile time errors. The more comfortable you become with the syntax of Java, the less compile time errors you will get. Don't worry, we will have homework assignments and labs that will help us get familiar with the Java syntax. Next, run the program and fix runtime errors. To understand how this may look like, let's take examples. First, we will consider an error-free scenario. We prompt the user for the number of hours, the user enters 10, then we prompt the user for the gross pay, and the user enters $150, and the program calculates and prints $15 as the output. Now consider the following scenario. When prompted for the number of hours, the user enters 0. This could be for any number of reasons. Could be a mistake. The user also enters the $150 when prompted for the gross pay. What will happen is that the program will stop running and an error message that says you can't divide by 0 will show up. This is an example of a runtime error, an error that makes your code stop running. So clearly our solution is not as good as we hoped for. We need to go back and fix it to check for the possible divide by 0 scenario. However, we will do that later to keep things simple in this video. The last step is to validate the results of the program. So far, we used integer numbers, 10 and 150, that result in whole output numbers, which is 15. Now, what if we enter values that can lead to fractions? For example, we could enter hours of work to be 10 and the gross pay of $152. A common mistake new programmers do is that they do not make sure that the division count for the fractions, as we will explain later in this course. In this case, the program will display $15 instead of 15.2. This is an example of a logical error. In logical errors, the code will compile, no compile time errors, the code will run, no runtime errors, and the code will give results. However, the results may be wrong like this case. Logical errors are the hardest type of errors to fix. The IDE will not help you spot or fix them. Instead, you have to go back to your code and recheck your logic.